Hello. My name is Anna. I am 25 years old, and I come from Spain. I recently moved to London to start a new life. Today, I want to share my story about my first day at work in a new country. This is my journey of learning English, making mistakes, and improving every day. I hope my story helps you learn English too. In my hometown, I always dreamed of living in a big city. London was the perfect choice. It is a city full of opportunities, with people from all over the world. I wanted to meet new people, explore a new culture, and most importantly, improve my English. In Spain, I studied English at school, but I didn't have many chances to practice. I could understand simple sentences, but speaking was difficult for me. When I tried to speak, I felt shy and scared of making mistakes. Moving to London was not an easy decision. I had to leave my family and friends behind. But I wanted to challenge myself. I wanted to step out of my comfort zone and become fluent in English. I knew it wouldn't be easy, but I was determined. The night before my first day, I couldn't sleep. My mind was full of questions. What if I don't understand my manager? What if I make a big mistake? What if the customers don't like me? But at the same time, I felt excited. I kept telling myself, Anna, this is your chance. You can do it. On the morning of my first day, I woke up early. The sun was shining, and I felt hopeful. I wore my uniform, a white shirt, black pants, and a little name tag that said Anna. Before leaving, I practiced some phrases in English. Good morning. How can I help you? And would you like sugar with that? I repeated them again and again in front of the mirror. It made me feel more confident. My goal for the day was simple: survive my first shift. I knew I would make mistakes, but I also knew that every mistake was a chance to learn. I was ready to face whatever challenges came my way. This is where my story begins. A small cafe in the heart of London, a young girl from Spain, and a big dream to learn English. Let's see how my first day went. It was my first day at the cafe, and I felt both excited and nervous. The streets of London were busy, filled with people walking quickly to their destinations. The smell of fresh bread and coffee was everywhere. When I arrived at the cafe, I stopped for a moment to look at the sign above the door. It said, Cozy Corner Cafe. This was going to be my new workplace. I took a deep breath and walked inside. The cafe was small but very cozy. There were wooden tables and chairs, and a big blackboard on the wall with the menu written in colorful chalk. The smell of freshly brewed coffee filled the air. Behind the counter, a woman with a warm smile welcomed me. She introduced herself as Sarah, my manager. She was kind and spoke slowly, which made it easier for me to understand. I felt a bit more confident knowing she was patient with me. Sarah showed me around the cafe. She pointed to the coffee machine and explained how it worked. She showed me where the cups, plates, and pastries were kept. Then, she introduced me to the cash register and explained how to use it. I tried to memorize everything she said. In my mind, I repeated the names of the things she showed me: coffee machine, cash register, pastries. It was a lot to take in, but I was eager to learn. After the tour, Sarah introduced me to my co-workers, John and Emily. John was tall with dark hair, and Emily was shorter and wore glasses. They both smiled and welcomed me to the team. They told me not to worry and said that they would help me if I needed anything. Their kindness made me feel more relaxed. I was glad to know I wouldn't be alone. My first task was to organize the pastries on the counter. Sarah handed me a tray with muffins, croissants, and cookies. She showed me how to arrange them neatly. I carefully placed each item while repeating their names in my head: muffins, croissants, cookies. It was a simple task, but I felt proud to be helping. I wanted to show Sarah that I could do a good job. Next, Sarah explained the cafe menu. She pointed at the blackboard and showed me the different drinks: cappuccino, latte, espresso, and flat white. Some of the names were familiar, but others were new to me. Sarah noticed my hesitation and reassured me that I would learn them quickly. For now, she said I should focus on remembering 2 drinks: cappuccino and latte. I repeated the words softly to myself: cappuccino, latte. It felt like a small achievement to start with. Before the cafe opened to customers, Sarah gave me some tips on how to greet people. She told me to always smile and say, "Good morning. How can I help you?" I practiced the phrase a few times until I felt comfortable. Sarah encouraged me and said I was doing great. Her support made me feel more prepared. When everything was ready, I stood behind the counter and waited for the first customer. My hands were shaking slightly, but I kept repeating Sarah's advice in my mind: smile and say, "Good morning." I was ready to begin my first real shift. I stood behind the counter, waiting for the first customer to walk in. My hands were shaking a little, but I kept repeating in my mind, "Good morning. How can I help you?" I wanted to make a good impression on my first day, even though I knew I might make mistakes. The bell above the door rang, and a man walked in. He was tall and wearing a suit. He looked like he was in a hurry. I took a deep breath and smiled. "Good morning. How can I help you?" I said. My voice was soft, but I hoped it sounded clear. The man looked at the menu for a moment and then spoke. "I'll have a cappuccino with oat milk. No sugar, please," he said. I froze for a second. I didn't know what oat milk was. I had learned the word milk, but this was new to me. I didn't want to look confused, so I smiled and nodded. "One moment, please," I said. I turned to Sarah, who was standing nearby. "What is oat milk?" I whispered. Sarah smiled and explained, "Oat milk is a type of milk made from oats. It's like almond milk or soy milk. Don't worry, you'll get used to it." I felt a little embarrassed, but Sarah's calm explanation helped me relax. I went back to the coffee machine and tried to remember what Sarah had shown me earlier. I picked up a cup and started making the cappuccino. I added the oat milk carefully, just like Sarah had demonstrated. When it was ready, I placed the cup on a tray and brought it to the man. "Here is your cappuccino with oat milk," I said. He nodded and smiled. "Thank you," he said. I felt a wave of relief. I had served my first customer successfully. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. After the man left, another customer came in. This time, it was a young woman. She ordered a latte with 1 sugar. I repeated the order in my mind. Latte, 1 sugar. I made the drink and handed it to her. She smiled and said, "Thank you." That small interaction made me feel more confident. I realized that I could do this if I stayed focused and practiced. As the morning went on, more customers came into the cafe. Some ordered simple drinks like black coffee, while others asked for more complicated orders. Each time, I tried to listen carefully and remember what they said. If I didn't understand, I politely asked them to repeat. "Could you say that again, please?" became one of my most used phrases that day. At one point, a customer asked for a flat white. I didn't know what that was, so I turned to Emily for help. She explained that a flat white was similar to a latte but had less milk foam. I repeated the word in my head, flat white, flat white. I wanted to remember it for the next time. I made mistakes, of course. Once, I accidentally added sugar to a drink that didn't need it. The customer noticed and laughed. "It's okay," he said. "We all make mistakes." His kind words made me feel better. I apologized and made the drink again, this time without sugar. By the time lunch hour arrived, I was starting to feel more comfortable. I had learned a few new words, like oat milk and flat white, and I was getting faster at making drinks. My co-workers, John and Emily, were always there to help me when I needed it. I appreciated their support. One customer stood out that day. She was an older woman with a kind smile. She ordered a cup of tea and asked me where I was from. I told her I was from Spain and that it was my first day at the cafe. She said, "Your English is very good. Keep practicing, and you'll get even better." Her words gave me so much encouragement. It reminded me why I had come to London in the first place, to improve my English and challenge myself. At the end of the shift, I thought about everything I had learned. I now knew how to make a cappuccino, a latte, and even a flat white. I had learned new words like oat milk and phrases like, "Could you say that again, please?" But most importantly, I had gained confidence. I realized that it was okay to make mistakes because every mistake was an opportunity to learn. That first customer who ordered a cappuccino with oat milk taught me something valuable. Even when I don't know a word, I can ask for help and learn from the situation. I decided that from now on, I would write down any new words I heard during the day and practice them at home that night. I went back home and thought about my first day. I was proud of myself. I had served many customers, learned new skills, and started to feel like I belonged at the cafe. It wasn't a perfect day, but it was a good start. I went to bed with a smile, knowing that tomorrow would bring new challenges and more opportunities to learn. After my first few hours at the cafe, I started to feel a little more confident. I had already served several customers, and each interaction taught me something new. I realized that even small successes, like remembering an order correctly, could make a big difference in how I felt about my progress. One of my favorite moments came when a customer ordered a takeaway coffee. At first, I didn't understand what he meant. He said, "I'll have a black coffee takeaway, please." I hesitated for a moment and repeated the word in my head. Takeaway. Takeaway. Then I understood. It meant he wanted the coffee to go. I smiled and quickly prepared his order. When I handed him the cup, he said, "Thank you," and walked out of the cafe. It was such a small thing, but I felt proud for figuring it out on my own. Later that morning, a family came in. There were two parents and a little boy who looked about 6 years old. The father ordered a cappuccino, the mother asked for a tea, and the boy excitedly said, "Hot chocolate." I smiled as I prepared their drinks. When I handed the hot chocolate to the boy, he said, "Thank you," in a cheerful voice. It was such a simple interaction, but it reminded me why I loved working in a cafe. I got to see happy moments like this every day. As more customers came in, I noticed that I was getting faster at making drinks. I remembered where everything was, and I didn't have to ask Sarah or Emily for help as often. I also started to feel more comfortable using phrases like, "Would you like sugar with that?" and "Is that for here or take away?" These small phrases became part of my routine, and they helped me feel more confident when speaking English. One customer, however, gave me a little challenge. He asked for a double espresso. I knew what espresso was, but I wasn't sure what he meant by double. I decided to ask for clarification. "Do you mean 2 shots of espresso in 1 cup?" I asked carefully. The man nodded and smiled. "Exactly," he said. I quickly prepared his drink and handed it to him. He said, "Perfect, thank you." I was glad I had asked instead of guessing. It showed me that it's okay to ask questions when I don't understand. Another memorable moment happened during the afternoon rush. A customer came in and ordered a flat white. By this point, I already knew what it was, but I still felt a little nervous preparing it. I focused carefully, making sure the milk was just right. When I handed the drink to the customer, she smiled and said, "This is perfect. Thank you so much." Her compliment made my day. It was the first time someone had praised my work, and it gave me a boost of confidence. As the day went on, I started to notice that I was picking up new words without even realizing it. For example, I learned the word receipt when a customer asked for one. At first, I didn't understand, but John explained it to me. A receipt is the little paper we give to customers after they pay, he said. I repeated the word a few times. Receipt. Receipt. Later, when another customer asked, "Can I have a receipt, please?" I smiled and handed it to her, without hesitation. It felt good to use a new word correctly. Even though I was learning a lot, I still made mistakes. Once, I accidentally gave a customer the wrong drink. He had ordered a latte, but I handed him a cappuccino. He looked at the cup and said, "I think this is a cappuccino." I immediately apologized and quickly made him the correct drink. "I'm sorry," I said. "Let me fix that for you." The customer was kind and said, "It's okay, don't worry." This experience taught me that mistakes are normal and that most people are understanding if you apologize and fix the problem. By the end of my shift, I had served dozens of customers, learned new words, and even handled a few challenging situations. I realized that every small victory, like making a perfect cappuccino or learning a new word, was a step forward in my journey to improve my English. I also noticed that I was starting to enjoy the process of learning. Each interaction, whether it went smoothly or not, was an opportunity to grow. That evening, when I got home, I wrote down all the new words and phrases I had learned. Takeaway, double espresso, receipt. I practiced saying them out loud, repeating them until they felt natural. I also thought about the moments that made me smile, like the little boy with the hot chocolate and the customer who complimented my flat white. These small moments reminded me why I wanted to learn English, to connect with people and be part of their everyday lives. I went to bed feeling tired but happy. My first day at the cafe had been challenging, but it was also full of small victories. I knew I still had a lot to learn, but I was excited for the journey ahead. Tomorrow would be a new day, with new customers, new words, and new opportunities to improve. After the busy morning rush, it was finally time for a break. I felt tired but satisfied with how my first shift was going. Sarah told me I could take a 20-minute lunch break. I went to the small staff room at the back of the cafe. It had a table, a few chairs, and a small fridge. John and Emily were already there, eating their lunches and chatting. I sat down with them, feeling a little shy at first. John noticed and smiled at me. "How's your first day so far?" he asked. I thought about my answer carefully before speaking. "It's good," I said. "I'm learning a lot, but it's hard sometimes." John nodded. "It gets easier," he said. "You'll get the hang of it." Emily asked me about where I was from. I told her I was from Spain, and she seemed interested. "Oh, that's great," she said. "Your English is already very good. Her compliment made me feel more confident. I explained that I had studied English in school but didn't have much practice speaking. "Working here is my chance to practice," I said. During our conversation, John and Emily gave me some tips for learning English. John said, "One thing that really helps is listening to music in English. You can learn a lot of new words from songs." Emily added, "And watching movies with subtitles is great too. It helps you match the words to the sounds." I made a mental note to try both ideas later. We also talked about some funny moments from the cafe. John told a story about a customer who once asked for a quadruple espresso. Emily laughed and said, "I remember that. We thought he wouldn't sleep for a week." Their stories made me laugh too, and I started to feel more comfortable around them. It was nice to have co-workers who were friendly and supportive. As we finished our lunch, Emily asked me what I liked to do in my free time. I told her I enjoyed cooking and reading. "I like reading too," she said. "What kind of books do you read?" I explained that I liked fiction, but I wanted to start reading books in English to improve my skills. Emily suggested some books that were easy to understand. "You should try reading short stories," she said. "They're simple but interesting." Before our break ended, John shared one more piece of advice. "Don't be afraid to speak, even if you make mistakes," he said. "That's the best way to learn." His words stayed with me for the rest of the day. I realized that speaking more was the key to improving my English, even if it felt uncomfortable at times. When our break was over, we went back to work. I felt more relaxed and ready to continue my shift. The conversations with John and Emily had made me feel like I was part of a team. I wasn't just a new employee anymore. I was starting to feel like I belonged. That afternoon, while preparing drinks for customers, I thought about everything I had learned during the break. I decided to make a list of all the tips John and Emily had given me. Listen to music in English. Watch movies with subtitles. Read short stories. Speak as much as possible, even if I make mistakes. These tips gave me a sense of direction. I knew that if I followed them, I could improve my English and become more confident. By the end of the day, I was grateful for my coworkers. Their kindness and encouragement had made my first day much easier. I promised myself that I would keep practicing and apply everything they had taught me. As the afternoon quieted down, the cafe started to feel calm. Most of the customers were gone, and I spent time cleaning the counter and organizing cups. It was nearly the end of my first day, and I felt proud of how much I had learned. Even though I had made mistakes, I knew I had improved. Sarah walked over to check on me. "How are you feeling?" she asked. I smiled and said, "It was a good day. I learned a lot." She nodded and replied, "You did great. Mistakes are part of learning." Her kind words made me feel more confident. Before closing, I wiped down the tables and helped refill the pastry display. While I worked, I thought about the new words I had learned: takeaway, receipt, and flat white. Repeating them in my head made me realize how much I had picked up throughout the day. I felt like I was starting to get the hang of things. Just before we locked the doors, a customer rushed in for a takeaway coffee. I smiled and said, "No problem, one coffee takeaway?" He nodded, and I quickly prepared it. It was a simple task, but I felt proud of how smoothly it went. When we finished closing, Sarah thanked everyone for their hard work. "Great job today," she said, smiling. Her positive attitude made me feel like part of the team. As I left, I thought about all the moments that made the day special. I had served customers, learned new words, and handled challenges. At home, I wrote down everything I had learned in a notebook: new words, useful phrases, and tips from John and Emily. Reflecting on the day helped me organize my thoughts and set goals for tomorrow. I realized how important it was to practice English daily and learn from real-life situations. I went to bed tired but happy. My first day had been challenging, but it was full of small victories. I smiled, thinking about the opportunities ahead. "I can do this," I whispered to myself as I closed my eyes. My first day at the cafe was over, and as I reflected on everything, I felt a mix of emotions. It had been challenging, but it was also a day full of growth and small victories. I had learned new words like takeaway and receipt, and I had gained confidence in using English to communicate with customers and coworkers. Every mistake I made had taught me something valuable, and I realized that progress doesn't happen all at once. It happens step by step. That evening, I sat down with my notebook and wrote about my experiences. I listed all the new words and phrases I had learned, along with the tips from John and Emily. Writing everything down helped me organize my thoughts and reminded me of how much I had achieved in just one day. It was clear to me that learning a language isn't just about studying. It's about using the language in real-life situations and being open to making mistakes. I thought about my goal of improving my English and how far I still had to go. But instead of feeling overwhelmed, I felt motivated. Each interaction at the cafe, whether it was serving a cappuccino or explaining a mistake to a customer, was an opportunity to grow. I realized that speaking, listening, and learning new words were all small steps toward fluency, and my biggest takeaway from the day was understanding that it's okay to not be perfect. Learning a language is a process, and the most important thing is to keep trying. Every word I spoke, every order I served, and every new word I learned brought me closer to my goal. As I went to bed, I whispered to myself, "You can do this." It was a reminder to stay patient and keep moving forward. Tomorrow would be a new day, with new customers, new words, and new challenges. I was ready to face them all with determination and a smile. To anyone learning a new language, my advice is simple: don't be afraid to make mistakes. Speak as much as you can, listen, read, and practice daily. Remember, Every small step matters. Keep going. You're closer to your goal than you think.